It's May 13th at 4 p.m. We're at the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority Board of Directors meeting at the Carson City Community Center in the Sierra Room. Welcome, everyone. Linda, could I get a roll call?
Mike Riggs.
Present.
Mike Jones.
Here.
Mike Santos. Stacy Giomi.
Here.
Tricia Trenoweth is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, if I could ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. At this time, I'll ask for any public comment. If there's anyone out there that would like to come up and make a comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the April 8th minutes. I've gone through them. I don't see anything that causes me concern. If no one else has any questions on the commitment, on the minutes of our last meeting, can we get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the meeting minutes of the April 8th, 2019 meeting as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda, I don't see any reason to move anything around. As long as everyone agrees, we'll continue with the agenda as posted. Moving on to item 7, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the contract number CTA 1920-003 with KPS3 for web digital development and e-marketing customer relationship management for a total not to exceed the amount of $135,000 a year. David, I know that you've been working hard to get this contract. We've vetted it and went over it in the last meeting, but I don't know if there are concerns or questions about moving forward.
Thank you, Chair Jones. For the record, David Peterson, Executive Director of the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority. No, I don't have any issues or concerns. I spent the last few weeks working out the details for this particular contract with KPS3. So just as a reminder, this does cover our web and digital development. So that's visitcarsoncity.com. Also, we will eventually build out visitcarsoncity.biz. This also includes our email, ECRM, which is our customer relationship management efforts as well. So with that, in front of you and in your packets is the contract that would run effective tomorrow through the end of next fiscal year with the possibility of 2 fiscal year extensions. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them at this time.
Questions from the board? Hearing none, I'll move, can we get a motion to approve the contract?
I move to approve the contract number CTA 1920-003 with KPS3 for web/digital development and e-marketing/customer relationship management, CRM, for the total not to exceed $135,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to item 8. Discussion and possible action regarding approval of the cooperative agreement between Carson City, known as the City, a consolidated municipality and political subdivision of the state of Nevada, and the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority, the CTA, a county fair and recreation board created by the city pursuant to NRS 244A for administrative services and facility use and management to be funded by 2% of the total 11% transient lodging tax rate, approximately $426,000 for fiscal year 20. David, I know you've been working closely with the city and Parks and Recreation, and I think we've had a pretty collaborative discussion and with him, and I think that's you've done a good job creating some transparency and setting some guidelines of what we do and what we don't do. So I'll let you jump in.
Thank you, Chair Jones. Yeah, it was great to work with Jennifer Budge, the Department Director for Parks and Recreation, Ben Johnson, and also working with the City Manager's Office to make some modifications to this agreement. This is a new agreement for fiscal year '20. And I think it's going to provide some flexibility not only for the city and then Parks and Rec, but also for the CTA as well, specific to events, endorsed events. And I like having some latitude in there and especially for parks as well, for the use of those dollars. So if I might, I'd just like to hit the highlights in terms of the changes, if that's okay, Chair Jones? Okay.
Sure.
So again, as I mentioned, this is a new agreement for fiscal '20. So starting July 1st through June 30, 2020. The first change is on page 4, and it's section 4 and then letter B. So we've included some language in here about facility fees, including equipment and services that'll be mutually determined by the Parks and Recreation Department and determined by the Parks and Recreation Department Director or his or her designee, and the executive director of the CTA, or his or her designee. So that's some new language in 4B. And then on bottom of page 4, letter E. So we're still section 4, letter E. Some changes there include, and I'll read this, events on Carson City open space properties will require prior approval of the Open Space Advisory Committee and/or the Bureau of Land Management when and where appropriate. And I think that's important to note because there are some areas, and Jen can add to this if she'd like, but that are specifically in the open space area or on BLM land that we might be bringing into this area. So we just want to make sure, again, that this agreement properly recognizes the different areas within Carson City County and sort of who controls those lands. So that's some modification there, again, on 4E.
Can I ask?
Sure, yeah.
And I know I looked at this ahead of time and I didn't bring this up, but I'm thinking of it now. Why is it different? Why is the process different on open space properties versus parks properties? So I see Jen coming up.
Hi.
Hi there. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Thanks for having me. Supervisor Giomi, that open space properties, we have some that have significant deed restrictions. Some we received from the a lands bill in 2015. And with that comes a programmatic agreement with the Bureau of Land Management. So there's sort of another layer of approvals that have to happen with certain open space lands. It doesn't apply to all open space lands, but a significant amount, and they're potentially ones that we would want to have regional trail rides or things through, and we would require, per that agreement that the city has with BLM, to get their approval on those types of events.
I guess I should have been clear. I guess what I was asking is why would the process be different for open space? So in 4B, it talks about events being and fees being approved by you or your designee and David or his designee. So why does it have to go to the whole committee? I guess that's what I'm asking. Why can't it be done under your authority? And then if you determine that there's a need for it to go to open space, that would be your call. I guess it's just a procedural question. Because if we always have to wait to go to open space, I guess that's my concern. If we, why can't we just have you make that decision? And if you tell David or this board that it has to go to open space, then it has to. But
Sure.
But if it doesn't, why can't you make the call?
So I think for the piece with the BLM lands, it's just, and I'll get to your open space question in just a second.
Okay.
But it ties into that. Because we're required, I just want to make sure that with the programmatic agreement that we have with BLM, that it's recognized that their approval is going to be needed beyond my approval. So I can't make.
BLM's approval.
BLM's approval may be required.
I'm good with
And in the
that.
programmatic agreement, it does refer to the Open Space Advisory Committee as well. So that's sort of where it ties back into that. I would love to, in a perfect world, do exactly what you're saying and make an operational decision. But there's other layers that have,
Okay.
with those deed restrictions, that require those approvals.
Okay.
And if we ever need to make a special meeting to make something happen, we'll do it. We will not be difficult and say, oh, well, we don't have a meeting in 4 months, so we
Right.
can't approve it. We're not going to be like that. We're going to be accommodating as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So I guess my question is, before we made this change, there was nothing there regarding open space and how the usage was?
Well, if you look at, I'm not sure if you have Exhibit A in your packet, but there's no endorsed events that would meet that criteria, so we haven't really had to broach that subject yet. There is the Carson City Off-Road, but that's a separate agreement. And that does go through several open space properties.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chair Jones, I think this is just kind of trying to position us looking forward, right, on the off chance that we do bring an event in that might be on these particular lands, that we just have something in place.
Yeah, I think it's good to have it. I agree with the concept of it. I was just trying to minimize the government red tape component. So anyway, you got it. Thank you.
Good luck.
Jennifer, you approve everything, and then if there's that other layer, then you go to these folks to get that added approval, right?
Yeah, well, basically what we'll do is we'll see where the event might be, if there's a trail ride, for example. And if it does go through a property that has that added layer of deed restrictions, then we'll go through those steps for that portion of the event. But we can always work internally to try to, avoid those areas and make it as clean and as quick as possible.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
And then if the next change is an addition on page 5, and this is still under section 4, and it's letter G.
Our page numbers are off from yours.
Okay,
It's the black underneath.
yeah, sorry, use the,
Oh, the black number, not the.
yeah, don't include the cover page, because the cover page, adds a page.
So what page do you want?
5.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, letter G. So this is new, and I'm excited about this particular language. So the Parks and Recreation Department will provide trails coordination services, including development of regionally desired trail systems and event recruitment. So I think this is great to have this in here, given the work that we're doing on the west side, building out the additional mountain biking and hiking trails. So, Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but, okay. And then the next change, and it's just a small change, letter I on that same page 5, we've added the words infrastructure and maintenance in there. And then the next change is going to be on page 7, and it's number 8. And this is new, to provide purchasing and contract assistance as needed. So Carol has been great over there at purchasing, helping me out through the RFP processes that we went under for the 2 contracts that we awarded last month and this month. So I've been bugging her quite extensively on contracts and language and just how to get these RFPs set up. So we have this in the agreement moving forward, just when we need support from Carol and her team, that we have it in there. And then the other changes are really just updating the fiscal year and then putting Nancy Paulson on as the city manager. And that's, by and large, the changes, adding me, adding Mike on the last page, just updating staff.
Mr. Chair. 2 things on page 9. You still have Nick Barano's email address in there instead of Nancy's, at least on the copy I have. And also, it's just my OCD, the spacing is different between the city and the bureau. I'm just kind of weird about that stuff. Does that make sense, what I said? Okay, thanks. It doesn't really, it's not,
I'll fix the email.
I'm just a weirdo that way, sorry.
And that's all I have. So we'll make both of those fixes. And then
Any other
the next
questions?
steps on this, so with CTA board's approval, it will then move forward to the Board of Supervisors for their approval next month, as I believe the plan. So I can't speak to which particular Board of Supervisors meeting that is. I think it's the first one in June, but I'm not sure.
Right. Well, if there are Any other questions from the board? If there are not, can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the cooperative agreement between Carson City and the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority for administrative services and facility use and management funded by 2% of the total 11% transient lodging tax rate.
I'll second if the motioner will include the changes noted.
As,
Good with that?
Good.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The hearing none, the motion passes with the changes noted. All right, moving on to number 9, for presentation, a presentation of the Carson City Cultural Commission's fiscal year 18-19 annual report and fiscal year 19-20 work plan and the Department of Arts and Culture fiscal year 19-20 budget. Mark, welcome. Thank you for coming before us today, and
Thank you very much. Mark Salinas, Arts and Culture Coordinator for Carson City. Just as a little background, so the Cultural Commission was established in 2008, and they only met quarterly. Back in about 2015, they started pioneering what is now the Arts and Culture Master Plan that was approved by the Board of Supervisors to become part of the city's master plan. They didn't have a full-time dedicated staff liaison, and so when I came here for purposes of introduction and communication, I started doing my annual report with the Cultural Commission in front of the Board of Supervisors. So this is the first time I'm giving this sort of infographic to this board. It's already been shared with the Board of Supervisors at their last meeting, and I've distributed it publicly to the Chamber, RTT, DBA, and local organizations. So Barb Dineo is our chair, and she retrieved comments from the other 6 commissioners to create the contents of page 1 and 2, which I'm not going to read for you. What I really want to do is go into some of the statistics that I put together for you. So the department overview was intentionally created without any type of art language reference, so one could understand just how this is being structured. And of course, I've been here 2.5 years, and it's developing, itself. And the more I'm learning more and more each day about the community and what it needs and where I can fit in. It's to provide clarity and learning about my strategy, but also establish the parameters and placement of my efforts within the city. So here you see 3 core elements: creation, education, and relation. These are ongoing administrative tasks. Creation is simply building the infrastructure and identity, whether that's the Department of Arts and Culture, whether that's as a city, us as a capital, as a community. It's always reflecting current needs. Education is the information of our artists, our collections, our organizations, our events, our grants. And then the relation is really the partnerships, the awareness throughout the community, our honors, historic mile markers, and making sure the community knows our inclusive practices. And where they all overlap, that's where I think we are. On the next 2 pages, you have 22 statistics that were not in existence March 2018. And so I just want to share a few of them with you. We have full attendance. That's a requirement from Carson City Municipal Code of not only our regular meetings, which are 6 times a year now, but 2 special meetings as well. Our audience has increased from 44 people in 2017 to 98 last year. We're really getting a lot of, I'm looking to expand the creative footprint of Carson City and bringing in Carson Valley, bringing in Silver City, bringing in Reno, South Lake, and they are coming to our audiences to share their information and learn from us. I don't believe you can move forward without looking at the past, and so I noticed on the calendar that the 10-year anniversary of 2018 for our Cultural Commission was celebrated. I looked through our records and invited all cultural commissioners from the past 10 years. And we had a luncheon that was sponsored by one of our local organizations at Bliss Mansion. It was really great to sort of connect the past and the future, and also remind commissioners, arts commissioners, at least once a commissioner, always a commissioner, and to stay within arm's reach so we can bring you into the future with us. Celebrate Culture grants, as part of our arts and culture master plan, we're tasked with helping elevate African American community, Basque community, Native American community, Hispanic community. And so what I want to do is separate some grant money so we can really target events that can nature those organizations, those cultural communities to bring in, like I said, that expanded footprint that we're starting to create. After this meeting, we're having what is typically annually our largest meeting. It's to review applications and score grants seeking redevelopment funding for arts and culture events that happen within redevelopment district 1 or 2. We've had a 175% increase in grant applications, a lot of new applicants, a lot of fresh ideas. I'm going to skip around here a bit. I have to say thank you to our IT department for getting us on the carson.org website. That also lists our documents, such as Arts and Culture Master Plan. It lists when we meet, who our commissioners are. It links us to our social media, and is also a place where we can place our announcements for events. As I mentioned, I make sure that we're active on social media, not only sharing what we do, but sharing what our community does. Speaking engagements that could range anything from the 10th Annual Tribal Tourism Conference in South Lake to the Men's Republican Association here in Carson. I was just asked in October to go to the Nevada Museum of Art in Reno and speak to them about what we're doing. You'll see one new sibling, and Silver City's advisory board named us their sister city in arts and culture. They have a residency program there that we're going to be tapping in to bring some visiting artists as lecturers here this summer. And we've already had a lot of creative ideas. Right now in City Hall, there are a number of works from the Silver City art collection on loan to us. If you've noticed in the recent Nevada appeal, there's now a Best Public Art and Best Arts and Culture Organization category, and that was through a simple ask, trying to get some of the events and some of the organizations that we have here in the mind of local readers. On the next page, I just drafted a few, I believe 7 of the 13 chapters of our public art policy, and that lays out the step-by-step procedures for the expenditure of taxpayer money. It's different than an arts and culture master plan, which is more like a 14-page wish list. This is the how-to. This is the actual user's manual that will be here for the long term. Under City Hall, I've been reaching out and collaborating with other city departments, other municipal departments. In last August of 2018, there was a National Arts and Humanities Month, and that was sort of my opportunity to reach out to Fire, Senior, Library, and Cooperative Extension to do a little video, 3-minute, 5-minute video intervention of discovering the arts and culture in these other municipal departments. So, of course, we spoke to the chief and we looked at some of the artifacts in the museum there at Station 51. The senior center, this gave them an opportunity to come to me and say, hey, you know what? We were just given 300 oil paintings by a local artist, and we don't know what to do with them. And so I think to date, we've installed about 120 throughout the senior center. Applying for grants is something that I do. Last year, we won a federal grant, the National Endowment of the Arts Big Read grant. That was a literary grant that challenges communities to make 30 days of programming. The Chamber named it as number 1. And, you know, on a weekly basis, I'm always trying to reach out to new organizations. Since the publication of this, new collaborations with the Railroad Museum, the Greenhouse Garden, the Neighborhood Improvement District, to name a few. 270 artworks installed. That includes artworks at WNC, City Hall, Senior Center, Library, and also the airport. Last week of April, I de-installed the 80 pieces of artwork at the airport, and they booked us for next legislative session, which will be in 2021. So again, this past year, they gave us 200 linear feet of space to advertise creativity in Carson City as soon as people get off the plane. 200 linear feet, 24/7 for 3 months. They want to give us more, so we'll see how that goes, because that was a lot of space. And just trying to, yes, sir.
So if, I mean, I assume this happened so fast this year, and you're still, I'm very impressed that you're able to pull together the parasols and get that, done in the amount of time. But now that you know, you'll have time to plan, and you should be able to fill even more space, right? I mean, I know it's a tall order, but.
Well, as I
but you
said,
have more
I'm
time,
learning
right?
more every day, and so I thought, well, I just need an annual calendar that will repeat itself. And no, when the legislature is in town, now I have a biannual, because also as another event, a sister event to this, we have the Nevada Day. Excuse me, give me 1 second. It's the Arts Day at the Legislature. It's an
yes.
biannual event, and so we have all these arts professionals here in the morning. They meet their representative and then they skip town. Well, the idea was to keep them here. And so we had a ticketed event, it sold out. And so, we brought in a lot of these other arts organizations, our neighbors, what they're doing for like sort of 5-minute presentations. We had a Russian symphony in, we had a muralist from Las Vegas, really some impactful programming. And so that's a part of that biennial calendar as well.
Well, I love the tie between the legislature and us, because I think all too often, people forget about Carson City, and I applaud you for that, because it's a great way to connect those two. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to skip to the next page. I want to give you a screenshot here. This was the work plan for last year. Partial completion only on the chapters for the policy and procedure. This is a custom-made document. It can't be copy and pasted from another city because it relies upon staffing, funding, the political structure, even geography, believe it or not. But I've been studying cities from 3.6 million, like Minneapolis, to Crested Butte, Colorado, 1,600 people. And this addresses what are the steps to, what are our priorities in choosing our placement? Who creates the stakeholder panel for choosing the works? What happens in instances of controversy? How do we de-accession a work when it no longer represents the city? A whole bunch of good stuff. And so we just gave a draft of those 7 chapters to the Cultural Commission. I'm going to rotate that internally to the other department heads, because it does affect Parks and Rec and Public Works and risk management. I'm going to skip to the next page. The work plan for next year is just retain our successes and really communicate how 1% for the arts in Carson City equals 1% for community vitality. And I think that's shown in those 55 organizations that we're reaching out to. And I think in general, community vitality is something that everyone can get behind. And in doing that, both myself and the cultural commissioners are interested in, discussing long-term sustainability options with local government, with this body, and the Cultural Commission. Because I'm a board member, on the next page, sorry, because I'm a board member of our state arts agency, I wanted to include a snapshot of state and federal statistics. One here is that the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis reports arts and cultural production contributed $7 billion and is 4.7% of Nevada's GDP, contributing to over 41,000 jobs. That happens to be the population of Fernley, Elko, and Ely combined. On the next page are some federal statistics, and I'll let you read that because I still want to hit the budget. Wow.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
What was that number again for jobs?
41,308 jobs.
41,308. Wow.
So, this has already been presented to the cultural commissioners. This is a snapshot organizational chart where I am. Some of the priorities, many of which we have discussed, but also a budget of 1920. And I reach out to Chris and finance to get an idea of what that 1% is going to be for the next fiscal year. I'm not supported by any general fund, so my salary and benefits comes out of that 1%. And you can see the services and supplies. This year, for the first time, I broke that down even further to 3 categories: operating supplies, professional services, and public arts programming. So under operating supplies, you see everything from attendance of rent, attendance to conferences, national and regional. This is important because I work alone. I need to be around other administrators to solve some of our local problems and challenges. Rent, office supplies, online services, memberships, DBA, Reno Tahoe Territory, Americans for the Arts. Some of these memberships, you have to be a member in order to apply for the grant. Professional services, CCAI, they are responsible for installing the artwork in this room, the courthouse, and the brick. Photographers, videographers, we have some, Rachel in IT helps me with this, but like the airport event was one example of where she couldn't be doing video and taking photography at the same time. Finally, public art programming, that's where the most of the money is, and some of that 12,000 is allocated to my job duties of creating events, annual signature events, and then the Cultural Commission. And again, I just want to repeat, this is sort of the first time that we've broken it down this far. And I spoke to the Cultural Commission last meeting and looking at their allocation and trying to get our meetings on board to match the meetings of Reno and Sparks, where at the beginning of the year, we vote upon the projects we want to do, allocate those funds, and then the meetings are my updates on those projects. That's my last slide. I want to acknowledge the time I've already taken up, but I thought it was very important for the first time to sort of pass some of those details along to this board.
No, I appreciate you coming in and giving us your report. You certainly, going through this report, I think the diversity you've brought to the commission this past year has been something nice to see. And when I look at the 175, is that what, or 175% increase in applicants for funds, you've certainly lit a spark under the art community there in the area. So I think that's very commendable. Having said that, I'll ask if the board has any questions.
I have one.
Sure.
Hey, Mark, on page 6 of your presentation under your work plan, you said creating a vibrant arts and culture community to grow cultural tourism awareness and influence in Carson City on local, regional, and state platforms. I was wondering, what does cultural tourism mean to you when you talk about it?
Cultural tourism is language that was used in my hire. I don't think it represents any living document. It was used in my hire as a job description. And I've been interpreting that as using, I spoke to the past and as far as history is also, and also the future. I think we need to be a contemporary capital. And I think just as much as history can be a part of the culture, so can a capital confidence of its future. And it's looking at our current assets, some of those 175%, some of those new people coming to the table, and seeing how I can help connect the dots for those organizations to make Carson City not only a proud city for the residents, but also have those residents become ambassadors to our visitors that come here.
At the Board of Supervisors meeting, you talked a little bit about the funding and your thoughts, and Barb did too, relative to that. The 1%, I think this body knows that the 1% that funds the department is sunsetted to end 2020, fiscal 2020, or is it 2021? 2021.
June 2021.
Right. So, can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, I guess from my perspective as a member of this board, that we at some point before that deadline approaches, we need to make a decision as to whether we think as a board it's worth continuing that funding, or removing the sunset. I mean, from my perspective, if we're going to do that, I would want buy-in from the properties, just like we got buy-in on the initial implementation of that 1%. But I at least wanted to throw that up and give you an opportunity to speak to that, Mark.
It was important that I share this information with this body before I take that next step. And, it certainly is difficult to, I use a couple of analogies. Which one will I use? The airplane or the car? I'll use the car. To drive the car and write the user's manual and hold the map at the same time. It's hard to do the tasks, but also fight for the existence of the job, so to speak, terribly difficult. With some of these events now on our calendar that are biennial, no, it's not the right way to wait to the last minute to approve those, because like for the airport, for an arts day at the legislature, those take months in advance of preparation. And of course, we don't want to be, with the success that we've achieved, we don't want to let down those partners that we've made in the process. Reno Tahoe International Airport, off the top of my head. I certainly have, statistics to back up my work, but also have, my emotional opinions as well. And I think maybe I'll save those to speak to those who want to hear them individually.
Well, I get the emotional attachment and the emotional component of that. I think that there's a business side to thing and there's the emotional side of thing.
Sure.
And I think, as a professional, ultimately we have to make a decision, but as a professional, we would look to you to say, hey, I can separate that. I'm emotionally invested in the job. I'm emotionally invested in the community. Let's put that aside for a second. Let's talk about the business side of things. And I think as we focus on that, then we have to make a decision. We know where funding is with the city. We know that it would be difficult to get general fund funding. I mean, I'm one member of the Board of Supervisors. I don't know that it wouldn't come about, but if the Convention and Tourism Authority feels there's value in what you're doing and what your department is doing, and the lodging properties who are collecting that on behalf of our visitors think there's value there, then I think there's some logic to pushing that forward. Obviously, there was enough of a nexus to do it to start. So I think it's a discussion that we have to have probably sooner rather than later, because it's going to take time to collect. I mean, the Board of Supervisors is going to have to approve that. And I, can't speak for the whole board, but I think before we would approve that, there would have to be some sort of buy-in from the lodging properties who are collecting that they're on board with it. And do either of you know the process I understand the process. It was a petition that, I don't know that anyone was around. Were you there, Chris, at the time?
Sounds like.
If I may.
Well, yeah, you're the chair. You can do anything you want, sir.
No. But, I've gone through the minutes of when this was, I guess, started in 2016. And there was some fairly contentious arguments from some in the lodging properties. But I think at the end of the day, everybody was confident that the 1% was a good thing for the community. I think going forward, well, first let me address the sunset. I think you're right, sooner rather than later. I think that's probably something we're going to address in the next fiscal year. I think before, it's almost June now, so I don't think we'll address it this year. But I think there's something to be said about developing a relationship, Mark, with the lodging properties, since they do fund it through the transient occupancy tax. I think it's, if they were here today, how would you relate to them, the positive aspects of arts and culture and as it relates to them and rooming nights? I guess that's the question they're going to ask, and that's the question we have to answer as a board. And, the properties, I get it, there's not going to be an ROI on every event, but I think we're going to have to, that's the business side, I think, that Stacy is referring to, that we're going to have to address with those lodging properties. And I know David is, we're going to start meeting with, trying to get regular meetings. Some of them are smaller places that, they have trouble getting to meetings because of, they're running the front desk. But it's, you've been now 2.5 years. What would you speak to that, the room nights generated?
Well, I would look to whatever practices whatever practice we have on hand right now to judge whether it's an arts and culture event or whether it's a basketball event. What's the criteria right now that we use to judge that? Are we taking surveys at the hotel, or are we asking the people who stay there? I don't know the answer to that question.
So, this is how I view it, okay? I think over the course of the last 2 years, 2.5 years, you definitely have brought the culture together here in Carson. I think now with what Mr. Giomi has expressed, as well as our chairman here, is that we're gonna have to start, now we need to start looking at how are we going to justify this to the lodging properties, because what they look for is heads and beds. And whether it's one event, 2 events, or a combination of events, or however we do that, this is what we need to start doing now so that time doesn't run out and we're able to make the right decision for you and the whole program, really.
Right. And I think some of the added conversation to your concern was how do we do it, but also who does it? It's certainly difficult for me to come out here, do the job, and then save the job at the same time. And what I would propose, maybe on a future agenda item, is that there is a committee formed to help spearhead this, and it's consistent of this board, municipal, city manager's office, and the cultural commission. Because I need help to do that.
Well, certainly, that brings back to just discussion. So now we need to really start, David, we need to really start looking at this and how can we start to gather that data so that we can properly make a decision and present this on behalf of the lodging properties, really.
Relative to Mark's comment, Ben, if the executive director put together a work group that would not have to comply with the open meeting law, is that a fair statement that reported to him? I guess, well, it probably should be public. I mean, the more I'm thinking about it, it probably should be a public body and have public meetings. And so, I mean, if there was, 1 or 2 members of this body, 1 or 2 members of the Arts and Cultural Commission, and maybe 1 or 3 members of the city, it probably should be and I think that's a good idea, actually. I like that idea.
Let me just, add something to that. Now that I'm thinking about it, when I came here to interview for the job, it was the city manager, board of supervisor, it was the ED, of the Visitors Bureau, it was the chair of the Visitors Bureau, it was HR, and it was the Arts and Culture Director of Reno. So that gives some type of comparison.
But that
maybe.
wasn't a public body.
No, but
And
as far
anyway,
as stakeholders.
I guess
yeah.
maybe that's something we can bring to not too distant future agenda, is a discussion on the formation of that, and then it gives you guys time to look into what options we have from whether it need to be a public body or it probably should be, but
I think it should be a public body when we're asking for tax dollars. And I personally think everybody wants to see, the art program continue. We just want to get the buy-in from the folks that are funding it, and they have to see the benefit to it. before we move forward, and I agree, we need to do
Well,
that sooner or later.
And it might be, instead of forming a whole nother public body, it might be one of our bodies. It might just be one of our bodies. It might be the Arts and Cultural Commission, or it might be the CTA. You know, I don't know that we need to form a whole nother body that the city has to staff, that the DA's office has to staff, that the clerk's office has to, you know, have recording minutes for. Anyway,
I agree, we don't need more committees.
amen.
You know, Mark, I think, and I think we all agree that you've done a phenomenal job, and we need to keep this going. I want to see this going. But we need to find, you know, what's going to be right for funding it going into the future, whether we stay with our current course, whether we find something else. And so it's going to take all of us to work together. I think your commission would be, off the top of my head, would be the people I would start with. You know, Mike said, our chair talked about forming relationships and going out and talking to, you know, the people, the properties, the lodging managers and the owners and stuff. And I know you're busy with your job, and, you know, you can't go out, obviously, and see everybody, but maybe your commission can go out there and, you know, they have a passion for it. Obviously, they're on the commission. Maybe they can go out and, you know, and come up with ideas or meet the lodging property owners. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have done that or not, but just form the relationships and show here's why we need to keep this going. Here's how it's benefited the community, because I think we're all on board that it has, you know, from this sense or from this side, but I think we just need to look into the future and how we keep this going for you.
Yeah, and just thinking, I'm not sure how that works, because when this started, you were under Culture and Tourism Authority. Right now, you've moved over to the city and the Culture Commission, so I'm not sure how that works now, but I guess we'll have to figure it out. Any other questions for Mark?
No, I'm good.
Well, Mark, thanks again. I appreciate you taking time to come speak to us and tell us about all the great things that have happened and what you're doing moving forward. Thank you. On to item 10, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the CTA Statement of Accounts Payable, Checks, and P-Card Report for March 2019. David?
Thank you, Chair Jones. It's a big month. So in your packets, you have an account activity statement for the accounts payable checks totaling $171,155.92, and P-card purchases totaling $9,287.70 for March 2019. And I'll walk through both of those reports at this time. So starting with the accounts payable checks in your packet, page 1 if you don't count the cover sheet. I'll hit the bigger amounts. The first line item you see is for A. Carlisle. Those were for the aquatics maps. That was a partnership with Parks, and we covered the printing. They did the design of those aquatics maps. The second line item is for the Carson City Visitor Guide brochures. Those are the rackable ones that we are doing, and all the racks through certified folder. So there's 50,000 of those that we produced. That amount was just over $4,200. And then the Bank of America, so last month, we approved the charges for the month of February. The difference here, if you recall, last month, we approved just over $11,000 on the P cards. The reason you see the $13,789 has to do with the computer equipment that was purchased by the IT department, right? Because we run those purchases through IT. So when you add the $11,000 plus the $2,600, our total charges are that $13,789 amount. Carson City Square, that was the March rent for our building. And then take you down to the Estepona Group, $2,200. This was the cost of basically extracting all of the data that was in the app that we previously had, so over 1,100 listings. That was where all the most current data was located, was in the app. So we had to contract out, had an agreement with Estepona Group to sort of break the encryption on that app to pull out all of our data. That way we can recycle that back into all the changes that are going to go forward on the website. So that was $2,200. And then the Konica Minolta, you'll see 3 lines. So the Duplo cutter lease amount, that's for 4 months, that's the $3,157. And then we have the regular monthly maintenance agreement charges for February and March for $3,300 and $3,400 respectively. And then the big one, $90,000, that was previously approved by this board at the February 11th meeting. That was item number 9, so that's what paid for the renovations up there at Eastgate at the depot.
David?
Yes.
Can you jump back for a second here? Can you tell me more about this, this $2,200, when you said you had to do something with the decrypt or pay somebody to decrypt the app? Can you elaborate on that
Yeah, we did. So
briefly?
yeah, I'll be brief. Basically, it was an app. It went through a couple of company changes, and the last company, bought a couple of companies, was with SimpleView. And we tried to go in there and we tried to extract the data, but unfortunately it was encrypted. So all of the listings, all of that route information on every hotel and restaurant and cultural asset and attraction, we needed to get that data out because that was the most current information that we had. So Shauna was doing the updates in there, and unfortunately, that app, although it was promised in its original form to sort of sync up with the visitcarsoncity.com website, it never did. So all the updates that were taking place inside that app were not making their way into the visitcarsoncity.com, our actual website. So obviously, it's a lot of work that Shauna has put into doing those updates, and this was the easiest way for us to be able to get all of that information out of the app, and then now officially, starting tomorrow, in the hands of KPS3 to update our actual website accordingly. You're welcome. The next 2 line items, those are our payments for the business activity months of December and January to the state. So that's the 3/8 of 1% that funds the Nevada Division of Tourism for $5,600 and change and $4,900 and change. And then the 2 payments to Nevada Momentum, most of that was for the dining guide. So finishing those projects that were underneath CAT. And if anybody wants any more detail, I'm happy to walk through that. The purchase power, that's our postage, of course. And, thanks to the great effort that Lydia is doing with our paid and our owned and earned media efforts, we'll probably see that postage go up a little more as people are requesting the visitor's guide from us through the website. So that's a postal recharge for just over $2,000. The Resource Concepts invoice, that's a payment. So those are for the environmental impact studies, the EIS studies. So that's just over $1,100 to Resource Concepts. And then Sierra Nevada Media Group, so that's the final payment. I think we talked about this last month. The last of the payments that are going through to the folks at Sierra Nevada Media Group for the internet, the targeted internet ads. So that was just under $5,000 for that month of February. And then we've got our sponsorship for the 2019 Concert Under the Stars event for $2,500. And then the Laura Viconti, that is our influencer. So we're working with her, and we've put everything. This was a grant through the Nevada Commission on Tourism, and that's for our whole influencer campaign, pushing us through the end of this fiscal year. So that's that $9,999, and again, that was grant funded through the Commission on Tourism. If there aren't any questions on this particular report, I'll shift to the P-card purchases. It's okay?
Any questions for David?
I'm good.
Okay, wonderful. So not a lot of charges on the P-card report. Most of these, again, now we have a separate P-card that is in place now for all of our media purchases, Facebook, Google. So you'll see these recurring charges come up on here for Facebook and Google Ads. And then this also includes some of the travel for Lydia for the social media symposium, as well as the DMA West Tech Summit. The one big charge on page 2 of the P-card report is for the Adventure Sports Magazine. That was our half-page ad in the April-May issue for $1,275. So happy to address any of the other smaller charges if you would like.
Any concerns or questions on the P card or the statement of accounts?
No. Well, two different ones? I'm
So
just
that-
now seeing it?
Yeah, it's the first one, the 3749 is for the fax, I believe. No, that's for the TV and internet, and then the other was for the fax line. But we've canceled that, and we're going to be getting a credit back for that.
Yeah, so if I could just add, we're fully on board with the city's infrastructure at our building. So they, I think, installed a new Wi-Fi, the whole 9 yards, right? So it's much faster, much more efficient. So it's allowed us to get rid of charter and all the service charges that we were receiving from them. So, yeah, just takes a little time, it seems, to get these credits back, but hopefully it will come in before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, we have it.
All right, if there are no other questions or concerns, can I get a motion for approval?
Sure. I move to approve the CTA activity account statement of accounts payable checks and P-card charges for March 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to item 11, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the adjusted CTA fiscal year 19 budget report. David, I'd like to start with the change that there was, I guess, an accounting error that we're fixing. So maybe we should explain that, start there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Jones. So the correction to this particular agenda item has to do with the expenditure side of things. And what it was, we sort of double counted just in this Excel file, the muscle-powered bike rack payment of $16,802. So we had it under the asset management, but it also wound up in the Excel file in the operating supplies amount. So obviously, one expense shouldn't have been in both expenditure line items. So the correction here was to remove it from the operating supplies amount. It was always in the asset management line item, which is on page 4 of the budget report. So where you see $30,806.48, it was properly accounted for in there. It was just duplicated underneath operating supplies. So the original agenda when it went out was for 47,000 and change under operating supplies, but in the corrected agenda item, we've removed, $47,810.36. We removed the muscle-powered bike rack payment, and the correct amount is $31,008.36 under operating supplies. So that's the little change. So again, nothing was wrong with the technical, actual accounting with the city. It was just in our spreadsheet in 2 places, our Excel file. So we're correcting that.
Or it was put in the wrong line item?
Correct, yes. Oh, okay, and then just to clarify, so that changes both the expenses total from $1,353,264.48 to $1,336,462.48. And then that changes the fund balance from $1,797,147.13 to $1,813,949.13, just to be clear with the impact on the actual agenda item for the motion.
Thank you for
So
the
that was
clarification.
that was the change. If the chair doesn't mind, I'll just walk through the budget report, okay? Thank you. Okay. So this is for the 9th accounting period through March of fiscal 19, so we're 75% through the fiscal year. And I appreciate Chris adding this on here because the expenses are through March, through the 9th accounting period, but the room tax revenue payments are what are received by the end of March, but they're really through the business month of activity of February. So I just want to remind everybody the lag again that happens with the lodging tax remittances from the properties. So we're 75% through the year right now. And if you take a look at the room tax revenue, we're tracking at 71.6% of the projected total lodging tax for the fiscal year. So I'm pretty pleased to see that because, again, we're reporting 9 months of expenses, right? But we have 8 months of business activity collections. So just to remind everybody of that. You'll see interest income, which we don't control, is almost doubled relative to the original budget. Again, we fall in line with the city's investment plans, and I don't begin to understand how that all works, but it's nice to see that we're doing quite well on those three interest income lines. So we're up about 194% relative to the fiscal 19 projection. If you will turn to page 3, you will finally see some payments now coming through to our allocations as far as line item 1. That's half of that 2% agreement that we approved earlier. So that's the July through December payment. So we make 2 payments to the city. So $111,728.07 is the amount that went to the city. The second line item, it's a little different with Mark because we do pay Mark on a monthly basis. So the $123,640.28 represents all payments through February, just to be clear. The field maintenance line item of $20,951.12. Again, that's the 2 payments a year, so that's July through December, first half of the fiscal year. And then the payments to the state, again to the Division of Tourism, $51,006.73. Those are payments for business month of activity, July through January. So we're off a little bit there in terms of the way that these numbers get reported and just when those payments are made. But I wanted to make sure everybody was clear with what those payments represent to each of the entities. And then just a reminder on the V&T Capital Project Fund, so that $155,000 includes the annual $65,000 payment plus that $90,000 that was approved back at the February 11th board meeting. Any questions about those payments? Okay. If you could turn to page 4. I'm just going to hit some highlights here. You know, the insurance, again, we pay that in full at the beginning of the year. Underneath special events, that includes the Nevada Day Powwow, the Nevada Day Parade, the Capital City Gun Club payments, as well as all world sports in that $38,631.25 amount. And then, as I mentioned, operating supplies, the $31,000, that is the corrected amount, removing the payment for the bike racks to Muscle Powered. And then page 5, I'll point out that those are the corrected numbers that you'll reference now for the motion for this particular agenda item. And this is the report, again, that's the taxation, kind of the roll-up page. So we've got adjusted revenue so far of just over 1.52 million, expenses a little over 1.3 million, and then our fund balance is a little over $1.8 million. And those are, again, the corrected numbers. So I'll entertain any questions if the board has any at this time.
Okay. All right. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the adjusted fiscal year 19 budget report as presented through March 31st, 2019 as corrected.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to item 12, the monthly non-action items, presentation and discussion only. Executive Director, David, give us an update.
Thank you, Chair Jones. So I have 3 items on my Executive Director report. The first one, I'm super pleased to inform the board of the team's efforts in April related to the Nevada Commission on Tourism's first cycle fiscal year 2020 marketing grant program. I'm happy to say with Chris and James and Lydia, they just did some amazing work. We submitted 13 grant applications totaling $121,120. The 13 grants were broken down as follows. Video content creation, digital and social media strategy development, digital advertising, paid social media advertising, an influencer marketing campaign, print advertising, brochure printing and distribution. And then as we look toward expanding James' role on the sales side of things, we also included for international IPW, excuse me, it's not POW anymore, but IPW participation. So I'm excited on that front. We also included for special events marketing to help us with the printing of materials for the different special events. And then we also submitted a specific grant for the Peter Stetina Sierra Prospect Gravel Grinder bike event that we're trying to bring here in 2020 as well. We also had a grant request for familiarization tours, and then a grant request for trade show participation as well for NTA and then Go West Summit. And both of those trade shows are actually coming to Reno over the course of, I think NTA is coming maybe next year, and then I think 2 years later, Go West will be here. And so I think some unique opportunities with the pre and post FAMs, right, that will happen throughout all of Northern Nevada because there will be several of those taking place. So again, just trying to position Carson City and get in front of these folks and then take advantage of the pre and post FAMs to really showcase Carson City. And then the last grant request that we made was for a lodging study, which I'm hoping, as Mike alluded to set up meetings with the lodging properties to see if there's a way that we can't tap into the data that the lodging properties have on their customers to better understand not only who these customers are, but when they're coming, how long they're staying, and sort of aggregate all of that data together. So I think it'll be very, very informing, for us to make better data-informed decisions as we move forward, not just relying on sort of profile data, but in this case, tangible actionable lodging data from the different properties on who their customers are. So looking at it again on an aggregated basis. So that was our last grant request.
So David, with our discussion with Mark, is that on that survey, could we maybe throw something in there about, arts and culture that while they're here and see if we can try to tie in some data there?
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, not specific to the lodging study, because that's, when we do the follow-up, yes, with customers, if allowed, and I'll address this in the second item, but if you give me a second, I want to talk about data collection as it relates to our customers, our consumer database. So if I can address it in just a minute. Okay, perfect. So again, there's no guarantee that the CTA will receive, any of these grants or even the full requested amount for the grants. I was told that there are 205 total applications for $1.74 million, and they plan to award plus or minus $1 million at their June 19th Commission on Tourism meeting. So keeping my fingers crossed that we'll get a little piece of that $1 million, obviously. So again, I just want to say, hats off to the team for their very thoughtful, I think, and thorough approach to the requests. I think it was a good exercise for the team to go through that. And I think the projects really fall in line with next fiscal year's plan of attack to really kind of extend our marketing and our PR and our sales efforts to drive new types of visitors from new markets. So if the board has any questions about the grant requests before I move on, I'm happy to address those at this time.
David, it sounds like we were under a tight deadline to get those in, and you got 13. So roughly, and you said 205 applications so Carson City's got 5% of all the, which I like, but is that a typical? Can we now next year with more time, can we put in, I don't know if the more you put in for do you make them seem less important, or
Well, so the approach that we took, I kind of looked to Lydia and looked to James as far as what are the priorities? We've talked internally about this. And I want to be mindful of, it's not about just putting in 50 different grant requests, right? Looking at our budget and where do we need the money? And so the timing was a little off because we, of course, had to submit our fiscal '20 budget to the Department of Taxation before this deadline happened, right? I think it was a few weeks earlier. So really what we did as a team was to look, okay, where do we need help? With respect to our budget, where do we have pre-existing funding? What are new programs that are going to come online where there wasn't like a base budget, I guess, from this fiscal year or last fiscal year to work off of? And that was sort of the approach that we took. We did leave some grants for the second cycle. And I will tell you, there was a conversation at a prior grant meeting, a training that Commission on Tourism did, and there were some questions that were asked about, should we go ahead and apply in the first cycle for things that may happen in the second half of the year, or should we wait for the second cycle, which will come out, I think that opens in November, and then those probably probably open in September-ish. And then those will be awarded in December. So where we knew there are things that we need help with, and we decided as a team to basically put those requests in the first cycle. And so that was sort of the approach. But again, we did leave some grants for the second cycle process itself. So there could have been more, but it just seemed the right thing to do to work with
I don't know if more or less is better. Your answer was better formed than my question. I just want to make sure that we're targeting areas that can make a difference.
No, absolutely. And I think, everything starts with the video content creation, because we will use that across all platforms, all mediums, all channels. And then having that digital strategy informs us for some of the other grant requests that we have. And then, like I said, as we want to kind of slowly build out from a sales perspective, still maintaining the special events that we're doing. I think it was a nice mix of grants. And of course, with the influencer and the FAMs, we still are covering public relations, I think, nicely as well. So, and some of this is new, too, in terms of, previous requests that this agency has submitted to the Commission on Tourism. So I think it gives a good look for the Travel Nevada team as well as the Territory Advisory Committee to kind of see this is the direction, we're moving in as the CTA going forward, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, so the next thing, I just wanted to provide the board with an update as it relates to the efforts between the CTA and KPS3. We're in the discovery phase right now, so working on strategic planning and then the brand planning efforts. For the first thing, I wanted to just provide an update. There was a question after the board meeting last month, about capturing the spring photos, the video and the drone footage, and I'm happy to say Lydia worked with the KPS3 team, so all of that took place the week of 4/22. So we were already off and running a couple of weeks after the contract was approved. So with that, on May 6th, I put the stakeholder engagement survey out electronically to, it was about 70 people, I think we may even be up to 71 or 72 people, representing the various lodging properties, bars, restaurants, community organizations, local, state agencies, and retail stores. Through noon today, there were 22 people that had completed the survey. Half of those requested a follow-up, whether that's phone or in person. We'll work with each of those folks to fit it into their schedule. We're going to keep the survey link up through this Friday, just to allow some additional stakeholders the time to complete it, because I kind of want to take the responses from each individual person, and that helps us customize a follow-up interview. So it's almost like a nice qualitative one-on-one focus group, So that's our plan there. We're going to do those interviews, those follow-up interviews, the last 2 weeks of May. So that's our plan right now. And then at the same time, I'm working with a good friend of mine who owns a research firm out of San Francisco. They are helping us with the 15,000 plus records that we have in our consumer database right now. Those are from people who requested materials, wanted to get on an email list. But there's some issues with just how old that data is, how complete those records look, in terms of the way that the data collection pages sort of existed on visitcarsoncity.com. So they're vetting, analyzing those records. We're trying to figure out what's valid. Do we have good email addresses? And then we're going to have to make sure that we meet GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation requirements as well because of the age of some of those records or a lot of those records. So I want to make sure we're fully compliant with GDPR, CAN spam compliance before we do consumer electronic online survey. And the plan is, based on the feedback we're getting from our stakeholders right now with the digital online survey and then those one-on-one surveys, it'll kind of help us craft the questions to go out after the folks on our consumer list that we have. So it'll be a random sample that we'll pull. I'm hoping, we may be able to salvage 2,500 completes on that survey. So I'm hoping that we'll release that the first week of June, just to keep us on schedule. And then all this will lead us to the June 24th board meeting, and we will present with KPS3 the initial discovery report at that time. And that's kind of the next 6 weeks as I see things rolling out, getting us to the June 24th board meeting. So happy to address any questions on the brand and strategic planning front. And the last thing that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, we have a great opportunity for familiarization, a FAM tour, and it's an opportunity, and I want to thank the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority for bringing a group of 4 Chinese tour operators. So this is a post IPW FAM on June 8th. And their rep firm, PhD Consulting, will also be here. So we've got these folks for an hour and a half. We're going to tour the Capitol, including the Battleborn exhibit hall, and then we're going to move on to the Nevada State Museum. So we've got the Chinese woodcutters exhibit in there, and if time permits, we'll get in maybe to the mine exhibit and the mint as well. So I plan to greet the group on that Saturday, and I want to thank Myron Friedman, who's the director of the Nevada State Museum. He's going to provide us with a guide for both locations, which I think is fantastic. So, and there may be some additional opportunities in July and August as well related to Chinese tour operators in conjunction with the RSCVA's efforts. So I think this is a great opportunity to showcase sort of the, again, arts, culture, heritage, history of Nevada. And with the Chinese travelers, they love government and government buildings as well. So it's a nice way to kind of tie those facilities together. So we'll see, maybe we can go to 3 hours, in July or August and showcase some other assets and attractions that we have, so.
Couldn't set something up with the Miss America pageant, huh? Couldn't make that tie.
Well, I think they tried, but with everything leading up to IPW, that's sort of the focus in terms of all the inbound, tour operators is IPW. So, but yeah, I'm here to take advantage of any opportunity we can get and to put Carson City on the map, and I think this is a nice opportunity for us.
But there might be an opportunity. I'm half joking, but there might be an opportunity with that, because I know they do a lot of photo ops, and I don't know how many years that RSCVA did the Miss America pageant. How many years do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
But might be an opportunity for us to showcase the Capitol building in a group show or a photo shoot or.
So, yeah, actually, they were, some of the contestants, do you want to hit on that real quick? Do you mind? We did get.
I know we have to
press
be
out.
done by 5:30
Yeah,
too,
we'll be,
so-
okay, 60 seconds or less.
Go.
I basically stalked them at the Capitol when they came. I just they would not release any information about their itinerary in Carson City. So I happened to just time them perfectly as they were walking out of the building. And the social media hits were really high, and we had some great presence that week in addition to all the trees at the Capitol. So we got a little bit of press, but not much.
I completely forgot. Yeah, we did work what we could. Yeah, just because it wasn't our
We can
event.
build on it next year.
Yeah, well, and also we, through Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall and Nevada Magazine, we actually printed the belly bands that went on 400 copies of Nevada Magazine that went to all of the contestants and the staff and all of those folks. And we had our logo on there, and there was a special thanks, to the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority. And it highlighted visiting here, and I think up at Virginia City and Lake Tahoe as well. So we did get, it was a nice collaborative effort there, so.
Thank you. Transient occupancy report? We are kind of pressed for time. I think we can skip that. Any future agenda items, David, did you?
No, I think. No, I think we can just move to D, and just as a reminder, that's a budget hearing on 5/21 at 2 PM, and that's a Tuesday. That was just to work into the schedule. The only thing I'll say about the meeting on the 24th, just remind everybody, we don't have a meeting like we normally have the second Monday in June. We have the meeting at the end of June because we'll be doing the augmentation for the fiscal 19 budget. And then we'll have, of course, the discovery being presented as well at that meeting. So a couple of big things at that meeting. Bless you.
Board comments or announcements, anyone?
Hey, real quick, I just want to make a comment on the V&T train this weekend, the Mother's Day train. Both days were sellouts. And so Elaine was very happy. And on Saturday, the 25th, that's when the season kicks off, the steam season. So just wanted to let everybody know about
Kind of
that.
made a comeback late in the week because it was struggling early, right?
Yeah, we had some press releases on both TV and radio. So, yeah. So it was a great, successful weekend for the V&T.
Mike,
this
may
time-
I add just one thing to the V&T? I want to thank Elaine too. They have their rack system up there, and she has been fantastic to allow us to put our different promotional materials for Carson City in the rack at the Eastgate Depot. So we've got the visitor guide in there, all of our rackable brochures. She's taken the information for the State Railroad Museum as well, because again, trying to tie our different cultural assets together. So when folks are there in line, they can, hey, let's get you down to the Railroad Museum in Carson City. So she's just been super in putting the materials in there. Any groups that she has, she's going to kit up bags, and that's going to, of course, include materials for Carson City as well. Visitor guide, the dining guide. I don't know if I'm missing anything other than, again, the railroad times and pricing. And so I think we're coming together here, working together very nicely with V&T and Virginia City.
Good. All right, thanks. This time I'll ask for any public comment. Anyone out there that would like to comment on anything? Seeing none, we'll move on to the last item, and that's to adjourn. Can I get a motion?
A motion to adjourn?
We're adjourned.